Hello, everybody. I am here with the amazing, incredible David Evans in his wonderful shop down in Fleetwood on Lord Street. So, if any of you ever are visiting Fleetwood, you must come to this shop. It's got all sorts of tram things and transport things, and also a big collection of phones.
Yes, very
For
much.
those that don't know, David is one of our Tramtown tour guides, and what he doesn't know about transport and trams isn't worth knowing. And today we're going to do 5 unique tram facts. David, what is your first unique tram fact about the Blackpool tram system?
Well, it's not absolutely unique because it was also used in London, but perhaps when Blackpool started its tramway in 1885, the tramway ran from what was called a conduit system. Not very many people know that. They think that it's the overhead system we have today from day one, but it wasn't. It was basically the best thing I can describe it as is like a scalextric set, really, because between the tracks there was this little extra slot, if you like, which down in the depths underneath, so you couldn't get your fingers into it and electrocute yourself, was this system. Which used basically what was an electric shoe, like a plough, I think it was called in some places, that would allow the current to be picked up from deep down beneath the tracks. And then that's what powered the tram. So there was no overhead needed. As I say, it was a bit like a sort of a very early scalextric set, really. But unfortunately, being next to the sea, of course, the sea would inundate it occasionally. The seawall was nothing like it is today. And so every time that the sea was a bit high tide or a bit stormy, it would inundate the tramway, and the electric system, of course, would go poof, and that would be the end of that. And
Yeah.
mostly what happened was the local co-op funeral horses were borrowed, and it became a horse tramway until they fixed it, until eventually got fed up of that. And then 1899 they went to the overhead system that we have today.
Wow, that's an incredible start, David. I said he is good with his facts, and you're not letting us down, David. So that was your first fact. What was
Yeah.
your second fact that people wouldn't know?
Let's have a think. If we go sort of fairly chronological, it's the fact that the tramway in Blackpool now we see as one system that goes from one end to the other, from Stargate to Fleetwood. But in its earliest days, it was two systems. One was the Blackpool Corporation system, although that had bought out a previous private company that started it in 1885. But then there was another company that ran from basically the Gin through to Fleetwood, called the Blackpool and Fleetwood Electric Tramroad Company. It was a shareholder one. It was a private company. It owned, people owned shares, and it had to make a profit. And in all its years, it did. And it made sure of that by also having its own power station, which is basically where Sainsbury's now is, at Redbank Road in Bispam. And what would happen is they would make the power for the trams, but they didn't need all the power they made, so they sold it to local residents. Local hotels and houses in the local streets had this power system literally just up the road, and so they would sell the electricity to the houses, and made more money doing that than they ever did selling tickets, although both sides of it did actually make a profit. It was finally sold in 1920, and then the tramway connected up. You didn't physically connect at the Gin. The tram would come in, literally one would come in from Fleetwood like that, another one would come from Blackpool like that, and you'd literally have to walk about 10, 15 foot between the two systems. Then they took the corporation took the private company over in 1920, connected the tracks up, and we had the same system that we have now. There's a slight sort of clue. It's rather sad that I know this, but the clue is that if you look north towards Fleetwood, the tram pole is in the middle with a little arm that side and a little arm that side for each side of the tramway. But if you look towards Blackpool, the tram pole's at the side with an arm that goes across both tracks. Two different systems, two different ways of having an overhead system. And even though it's been replaced over the years, they put them back exactly where they were. So it shows that the two different systems had two different ways of having the overhead put up. One was pole in the middle, the other one was pole at the side. Blackpool Corporation for the pole at the side, Blackpool and Fleetwood Tramroad for the pole in the middle. So there's two different systems and two different ways of having your overhead poles sat, if you
Wonderful,
like.
wonderful, David. And I like the fact you're doing this in chronology as well. So
Yes,
this
I'm trying
helps.
to.
Yeah,
Trying to.
so what was your third
The third
fact?
one is unique in the sense that in 1912, Blackpool was the only place we know of in the UK, we've not heard anything different, that had a hearse tram, a funeral tram. All over the world, there are places that have trams that are specifically built as hearses. It's a big thing, mainly in the South American countries like Cuba and Brazil, etc. But in Britain, it's never been the case. And what happened in 1912 was a gentleman by the name of Alexander Hollis, which I believe was an inspector down at Blundell Street Depot, which is now a housing estate near the Rigby Road Depot. And he fell down a pit, apparently, or had some injury, and it killed him. And so the council felt a bit sorry for the family, with it being on their watch, sort of thing. So they decided that what they would do is dress up one tram Martin box car in black drapes, and the other one, they took a window out and allowed the coffin to be put into the middle of the tram, and the two trams then made the procession up what is now Talbot Road to the Leighton Cemetery, because that was the terminus of the Leighton route. I know it's shortly going to be reopened, a little bit of it, up to North Station, but it used to carry on quite a lot further than that, up to Leighton Cemetery. There was a plan eventually to run it to what was called Bispam Station, but that we now know as Leighton Station, but that never happened. But if you go to Leighton, there is a big shelter in the middle of the sort of roundabout area, and that was the tram shelter that you waited for your tram when you had been to Leighton Cemetery. So in 1912, there was a procession using two trams, one for the mourners and one for the coffin, that made its way to the cemetery in Leighton.
Brilliant. Well, not brilliant if you're in
No,
that
not
coffin, obviously,
no,
but brilliant fact.
Yeah, and apparently Blackpool Corporation, Blackpool Transport Services, recently restored the memorial to Alexander Hollis, which I thought was rather nice of them as well.
That's a nice
sort
touch.
of suffered over the last 100 years or so. So they put some money into actually restoring it. So even though it's a long time since it happened, they've sort of still got a bit of relevance to it, if you like. Yeah,
it's been recognised, isn't it?
Yeah, they recognised it. Yeah.
And so, what is your fourth?
I'll have to write them all down. So let's have a look. Where are we? That it's the world's, well, it's a bit argumentative, this one, but I say it's the world's first municipal electric tramway. Is Blackpool, because in 1885 they started running, 29th of September. Technically, there'd been one the year before, because in the Winter Gardens grounds, a guy called Holroyd Smith had come from, I think, Halifax, somewhere like that. He was an electrical engineer, very early days of it, excuse me. And he'd done an experimental tramway, little run up, 100 yards up and down the gardens, if you like, of Winter Gardens. And the council saw this and thought, "Oh, that's all right, we'll have a bit of that." And so a year later, yes, they they actually ran it on the streets in 1885. So we argue that it's the first, excuse me, first one in the world as a municipal tramway.
Great.
Excuse me, I need a drink. I've got a little tickle.
All these wonderful facts.
Yeah. Let's have a look.
And finally, David, what's your final?
Let's have a look. Yeah. That until 1948, when the British Railways came in, what people may not know is there was a little tramway that ran, well, a little locomotive, although it was an electric one, called Franklin, because the J.C. Franklin was the manager at the time. And it would take coal wagons from the railway, which came in basically behind Cops Road Depot, which is now a car showroom just up Cops Road, excuse me, and would take the coal wagons off the railway, because it's the same gauge. People don't realise that tramways and railways are the same gauge, 4 foot 8.5, standard gauge, and basically would take them up to the coal yard at what was called GB Crooks, which is now we know as Thornton Gate. There's quite a large area there, and that's where all the wagons would be stored while the coal was unloaded. And so there were actual LMS wagons that would come down the tramway full of coal and then dump at the coal merchants. Crooks was there till the 80s, although in the later years they went by lorry. But till 1948, there was this little locomotive, which still survives. It's down at Cryche in Derbyshire, and it would take proper full-sized coal wagons up and down the tramway, emptying out at Thornton Gate, and then depositing the empty wagons back on the railway behind Cops Road to be taken away by the LMS off into wherever the coal was got from. So that's a little industrial side of the tramway that Blackpool had.
Brilliant, David. Thank you. Well, if those 5 facts don't impress anybody, no, nothing will. That was wonderful. Thank you, David.
You're
And
welcome.
we're going to do a more longer term or long
Hmm.
span interview, aren't we, about some of your knowledge and exploits?
Okay. Yeah.
Because for those that don't know, David's been involved with, I think, pretty much all the transport that's land-based, that's public: trains,
Yeah.
buses,
What's the
trams,
Yeah.
cars, taxis,
Yeah.
proper planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're really looking forward to having that
Mm.
that conversation. And if nothing doesn't whet the viewer's appetite, then this won't do it, or this will do it. So thank you, David. We look forward to
You're
catching
welcome.
up with you soon, and thank you
Yeah.
for those 5 wonderful facts.
Okay.